My name is Ji-hye, and for a long time, I believed in fairy tales. Ridiculous, I know. But when Min-jun proposed, under that cherry blossom tree, the petals falling like pink snow, I really thought this was it. My happy ending. He was kind, handsome, and loved me fiercely. And his family, well, I was so eager to be accepted, to be part of something bigger, that I saw only what I wanted to see. The first few months after the wedding were not bad. Awkward, maybe. Living with my husband's parents wasn't something I dreamed of, but Min-jun assured me it was temporary, until we saved enough for our own place. His father, my husband's father, was quiet, almost invisible. But his mother, my husband's mother, she was a force. Elegant, sharp-tongued, and always impeccably dressed. At first, her critiques felt instructive. Ji-hye, your kimchi jjigae is interesting. My son is used to a more refined flavor. Or, that dress is youthful. Perhaps something a little more mature for a married woman? I'd laugh it off, telling myself she was just trying to guide me, to help me fit into their family. Min-jun would chuckle too, patting my hand. Mom's just particular. Don't take it to heart. But then, the comments started shifting. Subtle jabs at first. Your mother was a teacher, right? How admirable. Such a stable profession. The way she said stable, it was like she was saying unambitious, ordinary. My mother, who had dedicated her life to educating children, suddenly felt diminished in her eyes. Then came the first family dinner at their house after the wedding. My parents were so nervous, wanting to make a good impression. They brought a beautiful set of Korean Celadon pottery as a gift. My husband's mother accepted it with a thin smile. How thoughtful. We have so much pottery already, but it's always nice to have more. Her tone, it was dismissive, like our gift was clutter. Later, during dinner, my father, trying to make conversation, mentioned his small business. He'd built it from the ground up. Honest, hard work. My husband's mother's perfectly sculpted eyebrows arched. A small business? So you're self-employed? The way she emphasized small and self-employed, it dripped with condescension, like it was something less than. My mother, bless her heart, tried to steer the conversation, talking about my accomplishments in university, my good job at the advertising agency. But my husband's mother just listened with a polite, almost bored expression. Then, she turned to Min-jun, her voice dripping honey. Min-juna, remind Ji-hye's parents about your father's company. Such a prestigious conglomerate. She practically glowed, basking in the reflected glory of her husband's family's wealth, while subtly, cruelly reminding my parents and me of our perceived inferiority. That night, after my parents left, their smiles strained, their eyes holding a flicker of hurt I tried to ignore, my husband's mother turned to me, her voice laced with a saccharine sweetness that felt like poison. Ji-hye, your parents seem very down to earth. So different from us. She didn't need to finish the sentence. The implication hung heavy in the air. We were different. And in her world, different meant less. That's when the fairy tale started to crumble. The cherry blossoms wilted. The pink snow turned to gray ash. The dream began to feel suffocating. But I was young, naive. I loved Min-jun, and I desperately wanted to believe it was all just a misunderstanding, that I was overreacting, that things would get better. Oh, how wrong I was. Things didn't get better. They got worse. It was like a slow drip torture. Each comment, each slight, eroding my spirit, chipping away at my confidence. It wasn't just about my family anymore. It was about everything. My clothes, my cooking, my friends, my job, even my opinions. Everything I did, everything I was measured against her impossible standards and found lacking. Ji-hye, that color washes you out. Don't you have anything brighter? This after I'd spent hours choosing an outfit I thought was appropriate for a family gathering. Are you really going out with your friends again? Shouldn't you be home, taking care of Min-jun? This one I hadn't seen my friends in weeks, buried under household chores and her endless demands. Your work at the advertising agency, is it very demanding? Perhaps you should consider something less stressful. Family should be your priority now. This Despite the fact that my salary was helping to pay their household expenses while we saved for our own place, a place that seemed to be receding further and further into the distance. Min-jun, he started changing too. He'd initially defend me in a weak, placating way. Mom, Ji-hye's outfit is fine. Or, Mom, she needs to see her friends sometimes. But slowly, her constant criticisms, her subtle manipulations started to seep into him. He began echoing her sentiments, albeit in a gentler tone. Ji-hye, maybe Mom has a point about the color. It is a bit pale. Or, maybe you should spend more time at home. Mom gets lonely. It was gaslighting, pure and simple. She'd make these cutting remarks, then smile sweetly. Oh, Ji-hye, don't be so sensitive. I'm just trying to help you. And I, desperate to believe her, desperate to maintain peace, would question myself. Was I being too sensitive? Was I overreacting? Maybe she was just trying to help. But the constant undermining, the relentless negativity, it was suffocating me. Then there were the stories. Stories about her perfect friend's daughters-in-law. My friend, Mrs. Park's daughter-in-law. She's a doctor, you know. And yet, she still manages to cook 3 meals a day for her husband and in-laws. So devoted. Or, Mrs. Kim's daughter-in-law. She gave up her career entirely to support her husband. Such a selfless woman. These weren't just stories. They were veiled comparisons, sharp daggers disguised as casual anecdotes. They were designed to make me feel inadequate, to remind me that I would never measure up. The disrespect towards my family continued, escalating with each passing month. If my parents called, she'd make faces, sigh dramatically, and say things like, "Oh, it's them again. Are they asking for money again?" My parents, who had never asked us for a single one, who were always offering help, always so generous. It was a cruel, baseless accusation, designed to poison my relationship with my own family, to isolate me further within her web of control. One day, my aunt, my mother's younger sister, came to visit. She was always the bright spark in our family, full of laughter and warmth. I was so happy to see her, a little piece of my old life, my real family, amidst this oppressive atmosphere. But my husband's mother, she treated my aunt with barely concealed disdain. She offered her tea, but didn't stay to chat, leaving me to entertain my aunt alone. Later, after my aunt left, she said to me, her voice dripping with condescension, "Your aunt, she's very loud, isn't she? And her clothes so flamboyant." She made my vibrant, joyful aunt sound vulgar. That night, I finally broke down. I confronted Min-jun. Tears streaming down my face, I told him everything. About her constant criticisms, her disrespect towards my family, her manipulation, her gaslighting. I begged him to see it, to understand. He listened, his face troubled. But then he sighed. "Ji-hye, you're exaggerating. Mom can be a bit direct, yes, but she doesn't mean to be hurtful. She just has high standards. And sometimes your family is a bit much. My family is much." I choked out, tears welling up again. "They are kind, generous, loving. They've done nothing but be nice to you and your family." He looked away, avoiding my gaze. "They are different. Mom just wants what's best for us. She wants us to fit in with our social circle." "Our social circle?" I repeated, incredulous. "You mean her social circle?" "Min-jun, this isn't about social circles. This is about her disrespecting me, my family, everything I am. Don't you see what she's doing?" He just shook his head, his voice weary. "Ji-hye, please, don't make things difficult. Let's just try to get along. For my sake. For his sake." It always came back to that. For his sake, I had to endure her torment. For his sake, I had to silence my own voice, swallow my own pain. For his sake, I was slowly disappearing. And in that moment, a cold dread settled in my stomach. I wasn't just trapped in her house. I was trapped in this marriage. And the man I thought I loved, he was no longer the man I knew. He was her son, first and foremost. And I was just an inconvenience. The breaking point came during Chuseok, the harvest festival. It should have been a joyous occasion, a time for family, for gratitude. But in that house, it was just another opportunity for her to exert her control, to amplify my misery. My parents were coming for the Chuseok meal. I had spent days preparing, cooking traditional dishes, cleaning the house until it sparkled, all under her watchful, critical eye. Ji-hye, you're not using enough sesame oil in the japchae. Are you sure you know how to make songpyeon properly? My way is much more refined. Every step of the way, she was there, correcting, criticizing, undermining my efforts. When my parents arrived, they were bearing gifts as always. Fresh fruit, high-quality beef, traditional sweets. My husband's father, surprisingly, greeted them warmly, even offering a genuine smile. But my husband's mother, her smile was tight-forced. She accepted the gifts with a curt nod, barely a thank you. Throughout the meal, the tension was thick enough to cut with a knife. My husband's mother dominated the conversation, bragging about Min-jun's accomplishments at work, her husband's company successes, their upcoming vacation to Europe. She completely ignored my parents, barely acknowledging their presence. My parents, bless them, tried to engage, asking polite questions, complimenting the food, attempting to bridge the chasm of her disdain. But she remained cold, distant, radiating an icy superiority. Then it happened. My mother, trying to find common ground, mentioned my grandmother, her mother who had recently passed away. My grandmother had been a strong, resilient woman who had raised my mother and her siblings single-handedly after my grandfather died young. She was a pillar of our family, deeply respected and loved. My mother spoke of her with reverence, with tears in her eyes. My husband's mother listened, her expression unchanging. Then, when my mother finished, she spoke, her voice calm, almost conversational, but laced with a venom that chilled me to the bone. So, your grandmother, she was a widow, and she raised you alone. She paused, letting the words hang in the air, then continued, her voice dropping to a low, disdainful murmur. How unfortunate. It must have been quite difficult to come from such humble beginnings. The air in the room froze. My parents' faces paled. My father's hands clenched into fists under the table. My mother's eyes widened in disbelief, then filled with a hurt so profound it made my own heart ache. And in that moment, something inside me snapped. Years of suppressed anger, years of silent suffering, years of watching her disrespect me and my family, it all erupted. I stood up, my chair scraping loudly against the floor. My voice, when I spoke, was shaking but clear, ringing with a fury I didn't know I possessed. Humble beginnings, I repeated, my voice rising. My grandmother was a woman of immense strength and dignity. She worked tirelessly to provide for her family, to raise good, honest people. What do you know about humble beginnings? You, who were born with a silver spoon in your mouth, who have never worked a day in your life, who look down on everyone who isn't as privileged as you are. My husband's mother stared at me, her face contorted in shock and fury. Ji-hye, how dare you speak to me like that? I am your elder, your mother-in-law, my mother-in-law. I laughed, a harsh, bitter sound. You have never treated me like a daughter-in-law. You've treated me like dirt under your feet. You've disrespected my family, my friends, my entire life. You think you're so superior, so refined, so perfect. But you are nothing but a cruel, arrogant, bitter woman who gets pleasure from belittling others. Min-jun finally spoke, his voice sharp with anger. Ji-hye, stop it. You're embarrassing yourself. Embarrassing myself? I turned on him, my anger now directed at him, at his weakness, his complicity. You're worried about embarrassment? While your mother has been systematically destroying me and my family for months. You've stood by and watched, done nothing, said nothing. You're just as bad as she is. Tears were streaming down my face now, hot, angry tears. I looked at my parents, their faces etched with pain and humiliation. And I knew in that moment I couldn't take it anymore. I wouldn't take it anymore. I had reached my breaking point. I'm done, I said, my voice trembling but firm. I'm done with this family. I'm done with this marriage. I can't breathe in this house anymore. I can't live under her shadow any longer. My husband's mother scoffed. Done? Where do you think you're going to go? You have nothing without us. Her words, meant to be a final blow, a crushing reminder of my dependence, suddenly sparked something else in me. Defiance. Resilience. I looked at her not with fear, not with anger, but with a cold, clear resolve. I have my family, I said, gesturing to my parents, who were now standing, their faces filled with a mixture of shock and fierce protectiveness. I have my dignity, and I have myself. That's more than enough. I turned to Min-jun, his face a mask of disbelief and panic. I'm leaving, Min-jun. I'm going home, and I'm not coming back. I walked out of that house, my parents following close behind, their hands on my arms, supporting me, grounding me. As we walked away, I could hear my husband's mother shouting behind us, her voice shrill with rage and disbelief. But I didn't look back. I didn't falter. For the first time in months, I felt a sliver of freedom. We went to my parents' house. It was small, simple, but filled with warmth and love. That night, I slept in my childhood bedroom, surrounded by familiar comforts, by the unconditional love of my family. It felt like coming up for air after drowning for too long. The next few weeks were a blur of legal proceedings, divorce papers, and the quiet, steady support of my parents and my aunt. Min-jun tried to call, to text, to beg me to come back. He promised things would change, that he would talk to his mother, that things would be different. But I knew better. He was still her son, and nothing would ever truly change. Then, one day a letter arrived. It was from my husband's father, a handwritten letter in surprisingly neat script. He apologized, not for his wife's behavior directly, but for the pain you have endured in our house. He wrote about how he had always admired my strength, my kindness, my resilience. He confessed that he had been powerless to stand up to his wife, trapped in her shadow for decades. And then he revealed something that made my blood run cold. He wrote that my husband's mother's behavior wasn't just about social status or snobbery. It was about something much darker, much more personal. Years ago, before she married my husband's father, she had been engaged to a man from a humble background. His family, like mine, was not wealthy, not prestigious. Her family had forbidden the marriage, deeming him unsuitable. She had been forced to break off the engagement and had married my husband's father instead, a man from a suitable family, a man she didn't love. And ever since, she had harbored a deep, bitter resentment towards anyone from a humble background, anyone who reminded her of the life she could have had, the love she had been denied. My family, our warmth, our closeness, our genuine love, it had been a painful reminder of everything she had sacrificed, everything she had lost. Her disrespect wasn't just snobbery. It was revenge, directed at me, at my family, for simply being who we were. The letter ended with a chilling sentence. She will never forgive you for leaving, and she will never let you go completely. As I read those words, a wave of unease washed over me. I had escaped her house, yes, but had I truly escaped her? Or was this just the beginning of a new kind of torment? The chilling realization settled in my heart. My nightmare might not be over. It might have just evolved. And the shadow of my husband's mother, cold, relentless, and unforgiving, stretched long and dark over my future.